People always assume rural land means nobody's paying attention. That's the funny part. They see open space, gravel roads, old fencing, maybe a guy walking his dog at sunset, and something in their brain goes, yeah, we can probably get away with using that. That's exactly what happened to me. I live outside a town called Millhaven, quiet little place where everybody suddenly became obsessed with economic growth the second a luxury retail plaza started going up across the highway. New coffee shops, boutique gyms, one of those organic grocery stores where a tomato costs more than a car payment. The whole thing looked like somebody dropped California into the middle of nowhere. At first, I didn't care. Let them build it. Let people waste money on $12 smoothies. None of that had anything to do with me. Then one evening, I took my Shepherd mix, Duke, out for our usual walk near the back edge of my property and immediately smelled something foul. Not normal trash, not roadkill, something wetter, heavier, sour enough to sit in your throat. Duke started growling before I even saw it. 3 industrial dumpsters, massive ones, lined up perfectly along my fence line like they belonged there. Lids hanging open, black trash bags split apart, rotten food leaking down the sides, cardboard boxes soaked through from grease and rainwater. Flies everywhere. I just stood there staring at them because, honestly, my brain couldn't process the audacity that fast. Then headlights swept across the field behind me. I turned around and saw a garbage truck backing in like this was a routine stop. The driver hopped out, rolled another dumpster toward the line, then froze when he noticed me standing there. I waved him down and asked, "Who told you these could be here?" And the crazy thing was, the guy didn't even act nervous. He acted relieved, like he'd been expecting somebody to ask eventually. He rubbed the back of his neck and said, this is the staging area. The staging area. I remember actually laughing a little because it sounded so ridiculous. I asked, staging area for what? He pointed across the road toward the shopping plaza construction site. Until their loading docks are finished, management needed somewhere temporary. Temporary. That word ended up doing a lot of heavy lifting in this story. I told him he was standing on private property. You know what he said? He shrugged and went, "Man, maps say a lot of things." Then he climbed back into the truck and drove off like this was somehow my problem now. That night, I barely slept because every time the wind shifted, the smell rolled through my bedroom window. Around 6 the next morning, I drove straight to the property management office for the plaza. Nice building too, polished concrete floors, expensive fake plants, young receptionist smiling like she'd been trained in a corporate laboratory somewhere. The property manager came out wearing heels sharp enough to stab somebody. Her name was Vanessa, and she had that tone wealthy developers use when they think everybody around them should just cooperate automatically. I explained the dumpster situation, and before I even finished talking, she smiled and said, "Oh, yes, that's temporary." There it was again. Temporary. I asked how long temporary meant. She crossed her arms and said, "Just until operations stabilize." I said, "Did anybody think to ask permission before putting commercial waste containers on somebody else's land?" She gave me this fake confused look and said, "We assumed you wouldn't mind." That sentence right there told me everything. See, this wasn't an accident. This wasn't some construction mix-up. These people looked at my property and decided I was the kind of guy who'd stay quiet because fighting back would be inconvenient. That's the part rich developers never understand about country people. We can tolerate a lot, right up until somebody mistakes patience for weakness. I drove home, pulled out my property survey, checked every boundary marker twice, and sure enough, those dumpsters weren't near my property line. They were several feet inside it. No easement, no temporary use agreement, nothing. Completely unauthorized. So I put up signs. Big ones. Private property. No dumping. No trespassing. I even installed trail cameras facing the dumpsters because something about the whole thing felt slimy. And for about 12 hours, I thought maybe the message worked, until the next evening when I walked back out there and found even more garbage piled around the containers, and one of my signs tossed face down into the mud like somebody had kicked it aside on purpose. That was the exact moment my attitude changed. Because now it wasn't just disrespect anymore, now it was entitlement. And entitlement is dangerous when people get used to never hearing the word no. Now let me pause the story for a second because this is where a lot of people make the wrong move emotionally. Most folks would have gone out there screaming, maybe chained the dumpsters shut immediately, Maybe started dumping the trash back onto the shopping center sidewalk like some kind of revenge fantasy. And trust me, the thought crossed my mind too. But according to standard procedure, the second you damage commercial property or interfere physically before documenting everything, you risk becoming the problem instead of the victim. That's how these corporate management companies survive situations like this. They count on regular people reacting emotionally first. From a legal perspective, what they did was actually pretty reckless. Commercial waste placement usually requires written authorization from whoever owns the land, especially if service vehicles are entering private property repeatedly. No contract, no easement, no signed access agreement. That creates liability issues fast. If somebody got injured near those dumpsters, if chemicals leaked, if rodents spread onto neighboring lots, suddenly guess whose property gets dragged into the paperwork? Mine. And psychologically, this is a classic power imbalance trap. This is a psychological trap developers and HOAs fall into all the time. They normalize small violations early because once you tolerate the first one, people become dramatically more likely to tolerate the second, then the third. It's basically social conditioning through inconvenience. They weren't just testing my land, they were testing my boundaries. The lesson here is, when somebody with money or institutional power says something is temporary, what they often mean is, we're hoping you get tired before we do. And honestly, most people eventually cave because fighting back takes patience, paperwork, and a tolerance for conflict that most corporations assume ordinary homeowners don't have anymore. They assumed wrong. The next morning, I stopped treating the situation like an annoyance and started treating it like a chess match. First thing I did was call the waste management company directly. Not the local driver, the actual regional office. Took me 30 minutes of automated menus and elevator music that sounded like it was designed to psychologically weaken people, but eventually I got a supervisor on the line. I gave her the dumpster serial numbers, my address, the shopping plaza address, everything. Then I asked one very simple question. Who authorized commercial waste service on my property? You could actually hear the pause on the phone. Keyboard clicking. More silence. Then she goes, Sir, according to our contract, service is approved for the Brookhaven Plaza development site. I said, correct, which is across the road. So where exactly is the signed authorization allowing your trucks onto my land? Another pause. Longer this time. That's when I knew I had them. Because corporations love paperwork right up until the paperwork doesn't exist. She finally admitted they didn't have any written permission from me at all. I stayed calm, didn't yell, didn't threaten anybody, just said, then I'm formally revoking access effective immediately. Her tone changed instantly after that. Very professional, very careful. Understood, sir. That was it. No argument. No dramatic confrontation. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is force people to follow their own rules. The dumpsters stayed there, but the trucks stopped coming. And wow, things escalated fast after that. Day 1, the trash just started overflowing a little. Mostly restaurant waste, takeout containers, busted cardboard boxes, coffee grounds, spoiled produce. Day 2, the lids wouldn't close anymore. Bags were stacked beside the dumpsters now, leaking onto the dirt. Seagulls somehow appeared out of nowhere like they'd received a formal invitation. By day 3, the smell had crossed the highway. Customers walking into the plaza were literally covering their noses. One woman gagged outside the smoothie shop. I watched it happen from my porch with binoculars, and I'm not proud of how funny I found that moment. Restaurant owners started panicking because nobody wants to eat tacos 30 feet away from what smells like the apocalypse. Around noon, my phone rang. Vanessa. Her voice sounded completely different now, no polished corporate smile hiding behind it anymore. Stress will strip the luxury coating off people real quick. She said, we're having a sanitation issue. I said, no, you're having a trespassing issue. Dead silence. Then she tried the teamwork angle. Maybe we can work together here. See, that phrase always cracks me up because working together somehow only appears after rich people start losing money. I asked her what exactly she had in mind. She said they needed temporary access restored while construction finished. I said, I already gave you my answer when I asked you to remove them. Then she made the mistake that changed everything. She said, relocating the dumpsters right now would disrupt operations. And there it was, the truth. They didn't ignore my property rights because they were confused. They ignored them because fixing the problem properly would cost money. That's when I decided to stop reacting and start applying pressure. 2 days later, contractors showed up at my place with rolls of chain link fencing. I had them build an enclosure directly around the dumpsters. Not my whole property, just the dumpster area itself. 8-foot fencing, locked access gate, bright warning signs every few feet, private property, no unauthorized entry, video surveillance in use. Completely legal, completely documented, completely devastating. Because now the dumpsters were technically secure, but inaccessible. Waste trucks couldn't reach them. Plaza employees couldn't reach them. Nobody could touch them without entering private property illegally. The look on Vanessa's face when she pulled up and saw that fence. Honestly, worth every penny. She stepped out of her SUV like she was about to negotiate a hostage situation. "You can't do this," she snapped. I pointed at the survey stakes still sitting in the ground and said, "Actually, according to county records, I absolutely can." She threatened legal action. I told her to go ahead. She threatened municipal complaints. I told her I'd printed copies of every photo, every phone call record, every camera timestamp since the dumpsters first appeared. That's the thing people forget about calm individuals. By the time we finally react, we've usually already prepared for the fight 3 steps ahead. 3 days later, the city got involved. County sanitation inspector named Ellis showed up in a white truck carrying a clipboard thicker than a Bible. Nice guy too. Exhausted eyes, coffee stains on his sleeve. Looked like somebody who spent his entire career dealing with humanity's dumbest decisions. He walked the property with me while I explained everything from the beginning. I showed him the original property survey, the camera footage, the placement timeline, even copies of my communication attempts with the plaza management. He barely interrupted me, just kept nodding slowly like a man watching a car crash in slow motion. Finally, he stopped beside the fenced enclosure and sighed. "Yeah, these dumpsters absolutely shouldn't be here." Hearing that out loud felt incredible. Not because I wanted revenge, honestly, but because somebody official finally acknowledged what had been obvious the entire time. According to standard procedure, commercial refuse areas have to meet access, sanitation, and zoning requirements. None of the setup did. The plaza started receiving daily code violations almost immediately. Health concerns, improper waste storage, unauthorized placement, access violations. The fines stacked up faster than anyone expected. Thousands of dollars in less than a week. Suddenly, the same management team that ignored me for days started calling constantly. Emails, voicemails, even handwritten notices left at my gate trying to sound friendly. Vanessa eventually came back in person, except this time she didn't wear the expensive corporate confidence anymore. She looked tired, real tired. She started with apologies, corporate apologies, the kind designed by legal departments, carefully worded so nobody technically admits fault. Then came the offers. First, she offered to remove the dumpsters immediately if I dropped any complaints. I said no. Then she offered financial compensation for temporary inconvenience. I said no again. Then she offered monthly payments for use of the land until their loading infrastructure finished construction. That one made me pause. Not because I trusted them, but because now we were finally speaking the same language. Accountability, contracts, consequences, real numbers instead of assumptions. A week later, she returned with a formal lease agreement. Defined usage area, noise restrictions, mandatory cleaning schedules, odor control requirements, environmental liability coverage, insurance protection, scheduled access hours. Honestly, it was the first responsible thing anybody connected to that plaza had done since this whole mess started. But I still didn't sign immediately. I sat at my kitchen table reading every line while Duke slept beside my chair and rain tapped against the windows. Because contracts matter. Tiny details matter. And buried inside legal paperwork is usually the exact place people try to regain power quietly. Then I added my own condition. One sentence. I could terminate the agreement with 24 hours notice for any reason whatsoever. No justification required. Vanessa stared at that clause for a long time when I handed the document back. "That's unusually broad," she said carefully. I shrugged and told her. So was putting dumpsters on somebody else's property without asking. She didn't smile at that. Neither did I. For 2 more days, the garbage kept piling up while management argued internally over whether they should accept my terms. Restaurants were already losing business. Social media complaints were spreading online. One local blogger called the plaza the luxury landfill district. which nearly killed me laughing when I read it. Eventually, reality won. Vanessa signed the contract. And just like that, the dynamic completely flipped. The same land they treated like worthless, empty space suddenly became premium operational real estate with strict conditions attached. Funny how fast respect appears once invoices start showing up. Now every month, right on schedule, a check arrives in my mailbox. The dumpsters are maintained professionally. The area gets cleaned regularly. Trucks follow designated hours. And every single employee who enters that fenced section signs documentation first. Because once people realize you actually understand your rights, they start behaving very differently around you. The craziest part, though? This whole situation could have been avoided if somebody had simply walked across the road on day one and asked respectfully. That's it. No drama. No fines. No legal mess. Just basic respect between human beings. But entitlement has a weird effect on people. The more authority somebody thinks they have, the less they believe normal rules apply to them. Until suddenly, they do. Looking back now, the dumpsters were never really the main issue. Yeah, the smell was awful, the flies were disgusting, and for about a week my property looked like the set of a low-budget apocalypse movie. But that wasn't the part that stayed with me. What stuck with me was how casually the whole thing started. Nobody threatened me at first. Nobody yelled. Nobody tried to bully me openly. They just slowly inserted themselves onto my land and acted like it was already normal. And honestly, that's how a lot of boundary violations happen in life. Not with force, but with assumption. Somebody decides your time, your space, your patience, or your silence is available for public use. And if you don't push back early, the behavior hardens into expectation. This is a psychological trap people run into with HOAs, landlords, developers, even families sometimes. Small disrespect becomes permanent structure if nobody challenges it. From a legal perspective, the important thing wasn't that I got angry. The important thing was that I stayed documented, calm, and predictable. That matters more than people realize. Courts, inspectors, insurance companies, they all respond better to organized evidence than emotional outrage. According to standard procedure, the person who controls the paperwork usually controls the outcome. And that's exactly why I never touched those dumpsters physically, never vandalized anything, never screamed at workers who were just following instructions. I kept the focus where it belonged, on the people making the decisions at the top. The lesson here is, boundaries only work when they cost something to violate. That sounds cynical, but it's true. The second ignoring me became expensive, suddenly everyone discovered professionalism, cooperation, and urgency. Funny how that works. And look, I'm not saying every conflict needs to become a legal standoff behind a chain-link fence. Most situations don't. But I do think too many people have been trained to confuse being easygoing with surrendering control over their own lives. There's a difference between kindness and permission. Huge difference. What's even crazier is that after all this happened, a couple local business owners actually came over and thanked me privately. One guy admitted the management company had been cutting corners everywhere because nobody ever challenged them. That really stuck with me because once people in power get comfortable ignoring one boundary, they usually start ignoring others too. So now I'm curious what you would have done in this situation. Would you have removed the dumpsters immediately? Called a lawyer first? Accepted the money earlier? Or would you have gone even further than I did? Drop your thoughts in the comments because honestly, I think this story hit a nerve for a lot of people who've dealt with entitled neighbors, HOAs, landlords, or corporations that assumed they could get away with something simply because nobody wanted the hassle of fighting back. And if you enjoyed this story, hit like, subscribe, and stick around. Because trust me, this wasn't the last time somebody underestimated a quiet guy with paperwork and patience.